Magnetism and Electricity, Video 1, Unit Overview. Hi, my name is Nick Kapura, and I'm currently the Science Specialist at the Winship Elementary School. In this video series, you'll get a crash course in the FOSS Magnetism and Electricity unit. We'll go through the goals for each investigation as we progress through the unit. But to get us started with planning, the most relevant Massachusetts science and technology standards covered are Physical Sciences, grade 3 through 5, standards 4 and 5, 6 through 8, and 9 and 10. You can also check out the student learning outcomes for the unit by visiting the Science Department Weebly site, which is bpsscience.weebly.com. Or just do a search for BPS Science Weebly, and it's the top result. Once you're there, you can navigate to the student learning outcomes to see your grade level options. As Magnetism and Electricity is currently a 4th grade unit, I'll show you 4th grade. Once it's downloaded, you would just click on it, and you would see this is Science, grade level 4, and it has each unit broken down into the student learning outcomes. The Weebly site also has a ton more resources to look through, including close read lessons and the common writing assignment prompts, which I'll come back to later, but you can get to them through the science and literacy section. And then there are buttons for the close reading resources and argumentation through the common writing assignment. Okay, so as we go through things, you either have or will soon have your curriculum binder and kit materials. The binder has a ton of useful and some not so useful information, and you should read through it. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through it all right now. You can also access the teacher's guide as well as other resources digitally at www.fossweb.com. And if you don't already have one, you can get a password to access the premium content, including the digital teacher's guide from the science department section of the SIS Aspen site. And so if you're in the Aspen site, if you go to the science department, you can go right here and we'll show you the directions to both get to FOSSWeb and to get your password to get the premium content, including the digital teacher's guide. As you look through the binder, whether it's the digital or the physical copy, you'll see that it comes with master copies of worksheets referred to as blackline masters or investigation duplication masters to use with each lesson. However, you may want to consider having the students use science notebooks. Teachers have used binders that collect these worksheets, spiral notebooks in which they have students write and draw, and tape or glue worksheets as necessary. I've developed these unit-specific science notebooks, and I use them with my students. I found that when I just used the worksheets, the students were more likely to view the investigation as something to race through and be done with once they had a sentence or drawing in every blank spot. So once I started using my notebooks, I've tried to leave the pages as blank as possible, with tables and diagrams provided only when necessary. I think this both forces me to teach students different ways to organize data and information, and it also forces them to apply this to their notebook writing. While it's a lot of copying at the front end of the unit, I don't only have minimal copying of quizzes, tests, and certain open response prompts for the next 3 months of the unit. If you want to use my notebook, you can bind it with the comb bindings or just staple it together at the top. And if you go to tinyurl.com/science notebooks Boston, so that's tinyurl.com /Science Notebooks Boston, you'll be redirected to a Google Drive folder in which I've included my notebook templates for first through fourth grade. Feel free to download them, modify them, and use them however works best for you. So in this fourth grade folder, it has my animal studies, magnetism and electricity, and motion and design notebooks. In terms of planning for the unit, I can see on the pacing calendar available on the Science Weebly that next year I'll be teaching this unit from September 8th through November 30th. Let's say I use the first week for teaching rules, expectations, all that kind of stuff. That gives me 11 weeks to get through this unit. While it's important to be flexible and use student progress to inform your planning, I like to sketch out my unit beforehand so I know where we're going and how we're going to get there. I like to build in 1 or 2 catch-up or extension days if possible. For this example, magnetism and electricity, I'm going to plan out my unit as a science specialist with the expectation that I see the fourth graders twice per week, with the rest of the state required science minutes to be completed in their homeroom. If you see your group more or less than twice per week, or are a homeroom teacher, you would modify your plan accordingly. I typically like to make a list of all the lessons in order that I would ideally like to teach. In this example, it comes out to 43 lessons. If I see my students twice per week for 11 weeks with 2 extension or catch-up days built in, that leaves me a total of 20 class periods to work with, meaning I need to cut 23 lessons right off the bat. While it's best to teach every lesson in the unit, logistically that may not be possible. As we go through the unit, I'll give recommendations as to which lessons are essential and which you might want to consider combining or skipping in the interest of time. This is an example of what my initial unit plan might look like. So these are the ones that I initially cut out in the interest of time. And then this is what my initial sort of outline of a plan might look like. So I have it separated by the week, and then the 2 lessons that I get done. That gives me a little flexibility in terms of when I might see them, if there's testing, or if there's a makeup day or something like that. Okay, so now you've gone through the objectives, you've seen some student documentation and notebooking options, the curriculum binder, and planned out the unit. Now it's going to be time for you to go through the science kit. Make sure you have everything that's supposed to be in there. There is nothing worse than prepping for a lesson on your lunch break and realizing you're missing something essential and the kids are coming back in 15 minutes. This has been an overview of the magnetism and electricity unit. In the following videos, we'll go through some tips for the specific investigations, way to support our students with special needs in our population of English language learners, and modifications to the set curriculum, among other things.